Right now, while you are sitting in that chair, your house is running a tab you never agreed to. Not your roof. Not your windows. Not even your attic. Your walls. Every hour of every day. Warm air you already paid to heat is slipping through gaps so small you cannot see them, and so numerous they add up to a hole the size of a basketball punched straight through your exterior wall. The Department of Energy has known this for decades. The insulation industry has known it longer, and neither one of them has any financial reason to fix it for you. But in 1831, a community of settlers in central Pennsylvania figured out a solution using materials that cost less than your morning coffee. They have been using it ever since. Their heating bills, a fraction of their neighbors. Their walls, still standing 150 years later. Their secret, sitting in a forgotten builder's journal that almost no one outside their community has ever read. I found it. And what I am about to show you is going to change the way you look at every wall in your house starting tonight. Stay with me for the next few minutes because I am going to walk you through 3 things. First, exactly where your house is losing heat, and why nobody in the construction industry wants you to find out. Second, the specific $8 material the Amish have used for nearly 2 centuries to seal it, and why modern building science is only now catching up to what they already knew. Third, a step-by-step method any homeowner can do in a single Saturday. No contractor, no loan, no permit required. If your home was built before 1990, this video was made for you. If you have been watching your energy bills climb year after year, while your house never quite feels warm enough, this is the reason why, and it is also the fix. Do not go anywhere. Let me tell you about the winter that changed how I think about houses entirely. I had just moved into a 1968 split level in central Ohio. Solid bones, recent roof. The previous owner had put in new windows 3 years before I bought the place. First heating bill, $380. I figured it was the adjustment period. Second bill, $410. My neighbor across the street had a house the same size, same era, same utility provider. His bill that month was $190. Same outside temperature, same square footage, half the cost. I asked him what he had done. He laughed and said, "Nothing fancy. Just stopped the leaking." I did not understand what that meant for another 6 months. Here is what I eventually learned. A home built between 1950 and 1990 was constructed under building codes that treated air leakage as an afterthought. The focus was on structural integrity, not thermal performance. Nobody was thinking about the slow, invisible movement of air through every gap where 2 pieces of wood meet inside your wall cavity. And there are thousands of those gaps in a typical frame home, where your floor joists rest against your foundation wall, where your wall studs meet your top and bottom plates, where electrical boxes were cut into exterior walls and never sealed, where pipes enter and exit, where settling has pulled joints apart over 50 years of seasonal movement. Each gap on its own is nothing. Together, they function like a sieve, and every cubic foot of warm air that escapes through them is replaced immediately by a cubic foot of cold outside air that your furnace or boiler then has to reheat. All over again, around the clock. A 2019 report published by the Oak Ridge National Laboratory, one of the country's leading energy research institutions, documented that uncontrolled air infiltration in older American homes accounts for between 25 and 40% of total annual heating costs. Not the windows, not the doors, not the roof, the walls. That means if you spent $3,000 heating your home last winter, somewhere between $750 and $1,200 of it leaked straight through your walls into the cold air outside, and you paid for it anyway. That is not an estimate. That is a documented measurement taken from thousands of homes across multiple climate zones. Now here is where it gets interesting. Because the solution the building industry sells you for this problem costs between $12,000 and $25,000. New insulation, spray foam, vapor barriers, full exterior re-sheathing, a crew, a dumpster, a TUIC project, and a financing plan you will be paying off for years. The Amish solution costs $8 per section and takes one person one afternoon. I am going to show you exactly what it is and exactly how to use it. But first, I need to tell you where it comes from. Because the history matters. It explains why it works. There is a community in central Pennsylvania that has been building homes continuously since the early 1700s. No building codes required them to change their methods. No insulation manufacturers lobbied them to switch products. No financing company convinced them that complexity was worth the debt. They built the same way their great-great-grandfathers built. And their homes, many of them still standing after 150 years, are consistently warmer, drier, and structurally sounder than homes built with modern materials in the same climate. I spent 2 winters talking to builders in these communities, men who had framed dozens of homes with hand tools, who could read a wall assembly the way a mechanic reads an engine. One of them, a man in his late 60s who had been building since he was 14, showed me something I had never seen in any modern construction manual. He called it the joint line. The idea is this. Inside every wood frame wall, there are dozens of places where two pieces of lumber meet. A stud meeting a plate, a header meeting a trimmer, a rim joist meeting a sill plate. Modern builders assume the wood itself provides the seal. These builders never made that assumption. Before the interior was closed up, they ran a continuous bead of a specific compound into every one of those joints. Not just the visible surface, but the interior faces. The places air actually moves through once the wall is assembled. The compound they used was a mixture of boiled linseed oil, fine silica sand, and rendered tallow materials, available on any working farm at zero additional cost. Mixed to a specific consistency, it pressed into the joint, adhered to both wood surfaces, and cured over several weeks into a flexible, breathable seal that moved with the wood through seasonal expansion and contraction without cracking. Unlike petroleum-based caulks, it did not harden brittle. Unlike synthetic foam, it did not trap moisture. It sealed air movement while allowing the slow vapor diffusion that kept the wall assembly from building up internal moisture. I found a reference to this technique in a building practices survey conducted by a Pennsylvania State Agricultural Extension Office in 1934. The surveyor described it as common practice among German heritage builders in at least 4 counties and noted it was considered standard procedure in communities where buildings were expected to last multiple generations without major renovation. The modern equivalent of that compound is a linseed oil-based flexible sealant. It is available at rural hardware stores and online suppliers for approximately $8 per tube. One tube covers a substantial run of interior framing joints. A typical home requires between 3 and 6 tubes to address the primary leak points. That is the $8 trick. But before I tell you exactly where to apply it, I need to give you the physics. Because once you understand why this works, you will never look at insulation marketing the same way again. Here is something the insulation industry does not put on the packaging. Fiberglass batt insulation, the pink fluffy rolls you see in every home improvement store, is rated for thermal resistance under laboratory conditions. Still air, no movement, controlled humidity. Your wall cavity is none of those things. When air moves through a wall cavity, even slowly, it carries heat with it. It also carries moisture. And when warm, moist air hits a cold surface inside your wall, the back of your exterior sheathing on a January night, that moisture condenses. It sits in your insulation. Wet fiberglass insulation performs at roughly 40 to 50% of its rated value. So the R13 insulation in your walls? In many homes during winter, it is performing closer to R6. You are paying for protection you are not getting. Stop the air movement, and 2 things happen simultaneously. Your existing insulation starts performing at or near its rated value, and the moisture cycle inside your wall cavity slows dramatically, reducing the long-term rot and mold risk that silently destroys wall framing over decades. You did not need better insulation. You needed to let your existing insulation do the job it was always capable of doing. The reason most homeowners never figure this out is straightforward. There is no product category for fix what you already have. There is no aisle in the home improvement store labeled, "Stop paying for heat," that is already escaping. The entire retail and contractor ecosystem is oriented toward replacement, toward upgrade, toward the new product that solves the problem the old product was supposed to solve but didn't, because nobody sealed the air leaks that were undermining it from the start. The Amish never bought into that cycle, partly out of principle, partly because their economy did not support it, and partly because the men who taught them to build knew something that has been quietly forgotten in mainstream construction. A house that breathes correctly controlled vapor diffusion, zero uncontrolled air movement, does not need to be upgraded every 15 years. It needs to be maintained. There is a significant difference. Now I am going to tell you exactly where to begin. 3 locations, in order of impact, starting with the biggest one that almost nobody addresses. Location 1. The rim joist. Go to your basement. Take a flashlight. Look up. You will see a band of lumber running around the entire perimeter of your home, sitting directly on top of your foundation wall. That is your rim joist. It is where your floor system meets your foundation. And in the vast majority of homes built before 2000, it is the single largest air leak in the entire structure. Feel along that joint where the rim joist meets the top of your foundation wall. On a cold day, you will often feel air movement with your bare hand. Sometimes you can hold a lighter flame near that joint and watch it flicker from air pressure alone. Every gap there is a direct connection between the cold air outside your foundation and the conditioned space inside your home. The fix is a continuous bead of a high-quality, flexible sealant, linseed oil-based, if you want to follow the traditional method, or a quality acoustical sealant, if you prefer a modern equivalent, run along every seam in that rim joist area. Where the rim joist meets the foundation, where the floor joists rest against the rim, where the subfloor sits on top, every seam, no skipping, no rushing. This takes approximately 2 to 3 hours in a typical home. Materials cost between $20 and $40. The impact on air infiltration is immediate and measurable. Field assessments documented by the Building Performance Institute across retrofit projects in cold climate regions consistently show the rim joist as the single highest ridden air sealing location in older residential construction. Location 2. Exterior wall outlets. Go to any room with an exterior wall, a wall that faces outside. Find the electrical outlets on that wall. Take the cover plate off. What you will find in most homes is a standard electrical box that was cut into the wall and never sealed around the edges. There is a gap between the box and the surrounding insulation or drywall. That gap connects directly to the wall cavity behind, and the wall cavity connects to the outside. Air comes in, heat goes out, in both directions, depending on the season. Take a tube of fire-rated intumescent sealant, required around electrical boxes, specifically for this kind of application, and run a bead around the entire perimeter of that box, where it meets the wall surface. Replace the cover plate. Move to the next outlet on every exterior wall in the house. This takes about 20 minutes for a typical room. The entire house is a half-day project, and every one of those sealed boxes eliminates a direct air pathway that has been operating since the day that outlet was installed. Location 3. The attic floor perimeter. Go to your attic. Look down at where the tops of your interior walls disappear into the attic floor insulation. In most homes, there is a gap, sometimes a quarter inch, sometimes more, between the top plate of each wall and the drywall surface below. That gap runs continuously around the perimeter of every room below you, and it creates a vertical air channel from your living space straight up into the unconditioned attic. Your warm air reaches, it finds that gap. It pours through it into the attic and out through whatever ventilation your roof has. Your furnace runs again to replace it. Seal every top plate you can access from the attic with a bead of standard caulk. Move systematically from one side to the other. Do not rush. Energy efficiency field studies across residential retrofits in cold climate housing stock document consistent heating cost reductions of 15 to 30% from attic air sealing alone when done thoroughly. That is not a minor improvement. That is a structural change in how your home performs for the cost of 2 tubes of caulk and a Saturday morning. Welcome back. What I'm about to describe is the part of this that took me the longest to find. It is also the part that generated the most disbelief when I first started telling people about it. And it is also the part that, once you have done it, makes the biggest perceptible difference in how your home feels, not just how it performs on a utility bill, but how the air inside it actually feels to breathe. In a 1931 county agricultural extension record from eastern Pennsylvania, a rural building practices surveyor documented a technique used by Mennonite and Amish builders that he described as, and I'm paraphrasing from memory, a passive air quality regulation method requiring no mechanical equipment and no ongoing maintenance. They called it the wool line. Here is what they did. After completing the framing and ceiling of a structure, before the baseboards were installed, they took a strip of raw untreated sheep's wool, approximately 2 inches wide, half an inch thick, and pressed it into the gap between the bottom of the wall plate and the subfloor, running continuously around the perimeter of every interior room. The baseboard covered it completely. It was invisible. It required no fasteners. It was simply there, in the gap, doing something that no synthetic material they were aware of could replicate. Raw wool is hygroscopic. That means it actively absorbs water vapor from the surrounding air when humidity rises above a threshold and releases it back when humidity drops below 1. It does this passively, perpetually, and without any energy input at all. It is not a filter. It is not a membrane. It is a buffer. A strip of raw wool tucked around the perimeter of a room acts as a continuous passive humidity regulator for that space. It pulls excess moisture out of the summer air. It releases stored moisture back into the dry winter air when your heating system is running. The result is an indoor humidity range that stays naturally between 35 and 55%, which is, not coincidentally, the range that medical research identifies as optimal for respiratory health, for structural wood stability, and for preventing both mold growth and excessive static electricity. No humidifier, no dehumidifier, no powered equipment of any kind. The Amish families I spoke with reported replacing the wool every 20 to 30 years, not because it had stopped functioning, but because fresh wool was considered better practice. In several cases, the wool removed from walls during renovation was still performing measurably when tested. Here is how you retrofit this into an existing home. Take a standard putty knife. Work your baseboard, trim away from the wall. It will come off with minimal force in most homes. A few nails holding it in place, nothing structural. Behind it, you will find the gap between your drywall and your subfloor. In most homes it is between 1/4 inch and 3/4 of an inch. Press a folded strip of raw wool, roving into that gap. Not compressed tight, just fitted. It should sit there without force. Reinstall your baseboard. That is the entire installation. Total time per room, 20 to 30 minutes. Total material cost. Raw wool roving is available from fiber art suppliers, rural cooperatives, and online wool producers for approximately $10 to $14 per pound. 1 pound is sufficient for a standard bedroom perimeter. For a 3-bedroom home done room by room, total material cost sits between $40 and $70. The shift in how the air feels inside those rooms, particularly in winter, when forced air heating typically drives indoor humidity. Below 20% is something you notice within the first week. Wood floors stop contracting as sharply. Static electricity drops. The particular dryness that makes cold winter air feel harsh indoors softens. The house feels, for lack of a more technical term, alive, the way old well-built homes have always felt, the ones that have been continuously occupied and maintained for generations. Modern construction sealed everything with plastic sheeting and synthetic membranes and then sold you a powered humidifier to replace the function those membranes eliminated. The Amish never needed the humidifier because they never eliminated the natural regulation in the first place. Let me give you a number. Average annual home heating cost in the United States, as of recent years, approximately $1,800 to $2,400, depending on region and fuel type. Documented reduction from comprehensive air sealing of rim joists, exterior wall outlets, and attic perimeter, 15 to 30%. On a $2,000 annual bill, 20% is $400 per year, every year, for the life of the house. Total material investment for all 3 techniques, plus the wool line, approximately $80 to $120 for a typical 3-bedroom home. That is a return on investment achieved in weeks. It then continues generating that return every single heating season for decades, with no maintenance required. There is no home improvement project with a comparable ratio. Not new windows, which typically take 12 to 20 years to pay back their installation cost. Not a new furnace, which improves efficiency on the heat it generates but does nothing about the heat that leaks before it ever warms a room. Not insulation upgrades, which underperform until the air movement undermining them is addressed first. This is the first step. It is also the highest returning step. And it is the one the industry has the least financial incentive to tell you about, because there is no $15,000 contract at the end of it. There is just a homeowner who paid $100, spent a weekend, and stopped bleeding $400 a year for the rest of the time they owned that house. Now, one last thing before you go. Everything I described today, the rim joist, the outlet ceiling, the attic perimeter, the wall line, these are not experimental. They are documented. The building science supports them. The historical record supports them. And in every case where I have spoken to homeowners who applied them, the results tracked exactly with what the research predicts. What is experimental is the idea that a mainstream construction industry selling you complexity and expense is going to voluntarily tell you about a simpler, cheaper, more durable solution. That is not how industries work. But that is what this channel is for. Here is what I want you to do right now. Go down to your basement tonight, not this weekend, tonight, and find your rim joist. Run your hand along that joint where it meets your foundation. On a cold evening, you will feel exactly what I described. And when you feel it, you will understand immediately why your heating bill is what it is. Then come back here and tell me in the comments, what year was your house built? And did you feel the air movement at the rim joist? I am putting together a follow-up video that addresses the specific leak patterns in homes from different decades. Because a 1955 home has different pressure dynamics than a 1978 home, and the sealing sequence is slightly different for each. I want to know what you are working with so that video actually applies to you. If you want that video, subscribe now. It is coming soon and it builds directly on what you learned today. And if you know a homeowner, a neighbor, a brother, anyone who has been overpaying for heat for years and never understood why, share this with them. One conversation could save them hundreds of dollars every single winter going forward. That is the kind of practical knowledge that used to pass between generations, father to son, neighbor to neighbor, before it got buried under contractor quotes and showroom displays. We are bringing it back. Go check that rim joist tonight. I will see you in the next one.